Declan Voss mapped the route. Callum Redden manned the helm, and Ronan Vale cleared the portatemen with nothing in common but one deadly goal: to smuggle Euro 160 million worth of cocaine into Ireland under the nose of military intelligence. But when the sea turned silent and the shadows grew close, Betrayal surfaced, and their perfect plan began to sink. On a mist-covered September morning, off the jagged southern coast of Ireland, a rust-stained cargo ship known as the Ocelot Dawn made its slow, calculated journey through choppy Atlantic waters. The vessel appeared ordinary to the untrained eye. Its manifest listed it as carrying agricultural equipment and irrigation systems, destined for a private distributor near Cork, but concealed deep beneath layers of false flooring in the vessel's lower hold lay one of the most ambitious drug shipments in Irish criminal history. Over 2 tons of high-grade cocaine, compressed into tight rectangular blocks and wrapped in layers of oilcloth and lead foil to avoid detection, were hidden like a secret waiting to erupt. The street value of the cargo was estimated to be around 160 million euros. Behind this elaborate operation was a man named Declan Voss, a former logistics mastermind who had once managed import and export chains for some of Europe's largest retail suppliers. Declan had no formal criminal record, but was known in certain underground circles as the Quartermaster, a title he earned for his unmatched ability to plan transport routes that avoided scrutiny. He had spent nearly 3 years developing the idea for this shipment, exploiting weak points in customs protocols, and bribing mid-tier shipping officials with quiet desperation and no paper trail. He needed a crew who wouldn't ask questions, and he found them in the shadows of lost careers and personal debts. Callum Redden was the first to be brought in, a former Irish soldier with experience in maritime security who had been dishonorably discharged for misconduct. With nowhere else to go and large gambling debts breathing down his neck, Callum took the offer without hesitation. He quickly recruited Tiernan Quinn, a stoic ex-Navy navigation expert who'd once served on Ireland's west coast and knew how to pilot through less monitored inlets and offshore blind zones. Tiernan agreed to join only after Declan promised an off-the-books payment routed through 3 offshore accounts for inside access at the docks. Declan approached Ronan Vale, a shipping manager in Cork who had been working in logistics for over 15 years. Ronan had grown tired of his modest salary and crumbling marriage. When Declan offered him 50,000 euros up front and more on completion, he said yes before he asked for details. Ronan's job was simple. He would edit the ship's expected cargo details in the registry and ensure inspectors were assigned elsewhere when the Ocelot Dawn arrived. Though the plan seemed airtight, Declan had one concern. What if something went wrong at sea? For that, he called in Malik Drury, a British-Irish fixer known in underground networks for organizing contingency protocols. Malik would operate from land, ensuring emergency exfil points and a fallback buyer if the original deal collapsed. Unknown to most of the crew, Malik had his own arrangement with the South American suppliers. He wasn't just there to help, he was there to watch. As the ship pushed eastward from the Azores, where it had paused briefly under the cover of night, to transfer its secret cargo from a fishing trawler, the crew began to feel the weight of the operation. Brodie Neal, the youngest member of the team, was visibly anxious. At only 21, Brodie had been promised a new life with just one job: guard the lower deck and report any tampering. He didn't know the full scale of the plan, nor did he asked. Everything was timed with precision. Declan's schedule showed that the Ocelot Dawn would reach the rendezvous point in Wexford within 48 hours. Ronan had already delayed inspections and submitted falsified logs. The crew followed pre-recorded GPS paths, fed through a black box mounted under the navigation console. What none of them realized was that 2 weeks prior, a spike in encrypted satellite messages around the Azores had raised flags with Irish military intelligence. They had begun watching. And as the Ocelot Dawn glided through the cold waters of the Celtic Sea, a sleek naval patrol ship had already begun its silent pursuit, tracking the biggest drug smuggling attempt Ireland had ever seen, as the Ocelot Dawn entered Irish waters. The crew remained unaware that their every movement was being monitored. The ship moved slowly, almost deliberately, as it approached the predetermined drop point off the coast of Wexford. The plan was to anchor offshore in a secluded bay just before dawn, where smaller boats would approach under the cover of early morning fog to unload the cargo. This part of the operation had been practiced in simulations and rehearsed during night drills months earlier. The men on board believed everything was under control. But what they didn't know was that the Irish Naval Service, backed by intelligence from both Garda and international agencies, had launched a classified mission called Operation Black, sure to intercept them. Hours before the ship reached the drop zone, the Irish patrol vessel La Ashling had taken position several nautical miles behind it. Its radar operators tracked the cargo ship's trajectory, confirming it matched the flagged coordinates received from intercepted satellite messages. A decision was made to act before the cargo could be moved ashore. Dawn, the crew was running final checks. Callum Redden stood at the helm, scanning the horizon. He noticed a distant shadow behind them, but dismissed it as a fishing boat, and Quinn adjusted the course by a few degrees, navigating according to the secret coordinates preloaded into the ship's console. The sea was calm, the skies heavy. With low-hanging clouds, it felt eerily quiet. Then, just before sunrise, everything changed. A distant roar grew louder, and within minutes, two dark helicopters burst through the gray morning haze, hovering above the ship. The whirling blades chopped the silence into chaos. Moments later, the Naval Service patrol vessel emerged at full speed from behind, positioning itself alongside the Ocelot Dawn. Searchlights activated. A loud siren echoed across the water. Panic spread instantly. Brody Neal rushed below deck. To destroy any logs or notes, Callum tried to stall the vessel's systems, knowing the authorities would seize the navigation box and use it as evidence. Tiernan shouted orders, but the crew was frozen in disbelief. They had trained for this, but it wasn't a drill anymore. On command, soldiers from the Irish Naval Service fast-roped from helicopters onto the deck of the Ocelot Dawn, armed and coordinated. They quickly secured key access points. Callum raised his hands and surrendered immediately, urging others to do the same. Within minutes, the entire crew was restrained, disarmed, and separated across the deck. No shots were fired. There was no resistance. The bust had been executed flawlessly as authorities searched the ship. Trained drug detection teams located the concealed hatch in the lower hold. Using specialized tools, they pried open the false floor. What they uncovered shocked even the most seasoned officers. Massive bundles wrapped in industrial-grade foil filled the chamber. It was a warehouse hidden beneath the sea. Each brick of cocaine was stamped with foreign cartel symbols, some bearing unusual numeric codes for tracking purposes. Forensic analysts began cataloging every item, while news of the interception started to leak to national media outlets. Back on land, Malik Drury sat in a rented vehicle near the shoreline, waiting for a signal that never came. When the planned communication failed, he checked marine tracking software and saw the cargo ship's status had changed. It wasn't just late, it had disappeared from the commercial radar entirely. Within the hour, he realized the operation had failed. Bleak abandoned his vehicle and vanished into the rural backroads of Wexford. The bust sent shockwaves through the country. By evening, Irish news channels were broadcasting aerial footage of the intercepted vessel, headlines reading, "Ireland's largest drug haul foiled at sea." Officials confirmed the quantity seized was unprecedented in Irish history. But for law enforcement, this was only the beginning. With 8 men in custody and 1 on the run, the investigation was about to go deeper than anyone expected. Ship was only the surface. What lay beneath was a network far more dangerous than it first appeared. In the days following the dramatic seizure of the Ocelot Dawn, investigators moved swiftly. The cocaine bricks, when tested, showed a purity level rarely seen in Irish drug hauls. Experts speculated the shipment had originated directly from Colombia or Peru before arriving in Venezuela and then traveling across the Atlantic. With 8 crew members detained under high security, Garda and military intelligence launched a joint task force to uncover the full extent of the smuggling operation. Every item on board the ship was cataloged: phones, personal journals, bank cards, hard drives, and hidden compartments. The crew had maintained silence, but evidence began to tell its own story. The first major breakthrough came from Tiernan Quinn's confiscated phone. Though it had been wiped clean, forensic teams recovered deleted data through specialized software. Hidden behind what looked like a common weather app were encrypted files containing strings of GPS coordinates and audio logs. Some files showed maps of past transatlantic routes. These breadcrumbs began to form a pattern, revealing that the Ocelot Dawn was not a standalone operation. It was part of a series of shipments. As the pressure mounted, detectives turned their attention to the financial side. A paper trail led. 2 shell companies registered in Panama and Malta. One of the firms, listed under a false identity, paid regular dividends to a Dublin-based investment manager named Aidan Flynn. Flynn had no criminal record, but whispers about his lavish lifestyle despite modest business dealings had raised suspicions for years. Now, with his name appearing repeatedly across offshore financial transfers, investigators moved to freeze his accounts and seize assets. At the same time, data from Ronan Vale's work computer provided a disturbing level of access manipulation. Log records showed that Ronan had altered port inspection schedules and removed the Ocelot Dawn from dock surveillance queues just days before its arrival. These digital footprints, along with call records linking him to an unregistered number in Spain, made his involvement undeniable. During questioning, Ronan remained tight-lipped, but his emails revealed encrypted conversations discussing shipment clearance and fog cover schedules. Meanwhile, Seamus Keogh, one of the quieter crew members, became a person of interest, for entirely different reasons. A fingerprint match tied him to an unsolved case in Lisbon, where a similar cargo vessel had been found abandoned with signs of tampering. It turned out that Seamus had used a false name and had entered Ireland under a different identity. Investigators now believe that he may have participated in multiple smuggling runs across Europe, using maritime jobs as cover. Surveillance from previous dockyards placed him in Rotterdam, Naples, and Faro within the last 2 years. One of the most alarming discoveries came from voice data extracted from a secure walkie-talkie found in Brodie Neal's bunk. A single recording revealed a conversation between Brodie and another unidentified party discussing contingency plans if the coast is compromised. Though heavily distorted, analysts traced the transmission to a relay tower used by Malik Drury. With Malik still missing, it became clear he played a far larger role than originally suspected. Each layer pulled back only exposed more complexity. Intelligence agencies from the UK and Europol joined the investigation. They believed the Ocelot Dawn was just one branch of a sophisticated network using older cargo ships, corrupt port officials, dense satellite communications to bypass traditional surveillance systems. As the pieces began falling into place, Garda knew the story wasn't close to finished. The 8 arrested men were only a fraction of the machine. Somewhere out there, the architects of the empire remained untouched, watching, and possibly already preparing the next move. As the investigation into the Ocelot Dawn deepened, tensions rose behind closed doors. The authorities had collected mountains of digital evidence, financial records, and intercepted messages. But what they lacked was a direct witness who could explain the inner workings of the operation in full. The crew had maintained a code of silence since their arrest, each man holding out hope that the others would say nothing, preserving a chance, however, slim of reduced sentences or a mistrial. But that fragile loyalty cracked when one of them, unexpectedly, agreed to cooperate. It was Seamus Keogh who broke first. The quiet crewman, whose identity had already been exposed as false, struck a deal with prosecutors. In exchange for a reduced sentence and protection, he agreed to disclose everything he knew. His testimony would become the key to unlocking the entire case. Authorities moved him to a secure facility under armed guard. And within days, Seamus began recounting the details of the smuggling ring names, locations, routes, conversations, even the way the cartel branded each brick of cocaine for tracking. He had been working with the organization for nearly 4 years, never directly touching the product but orchestrating the process through layers of intermediaries. Seamus revealed Declan had planned the ship's timing to avoid peak naval patrol hours and used compromised officials like Rowan and Vale to manipulate inspection systems. More shockingly, he exposed how Aidan Flynn laundered cartel money through bogus investment vehicles, including a luxury property firm in Monaco that didn't actually own any real estate. Unbeknownst to his fellow crew members, he had secretly recorded several key meetings during the planning stages of the operation. These recordings had been hidden in a modified button camera stitched into the lining of his jacket. Originally meant as insurance in case the operation turned sour, the files now served as a goldmine for prosecutors. In one of the clips, Declan's voice could be heard describing how he would leave Ireland the moment the drop was completed, using a new identity and a private jet scheduled to depart from a small, unregistered airfield. Seamus also named Brodie Neal as a plant not from the cartel, but from Malik Drury, who had grown increasingly suspicious of Callum Redden. The cartel feared Callum was taking more than his cut and using side routes to run his own product. Brodie was brought in at the last minute to monitor Callum's movements and report back to Malik. This revelation changed the direction of the investigation entirely. Interpol issued a red notice, and his bank accounts were frozen across 5 countries. Surveillance footage finally placed him at a hostel in Manchester 2 days after the bust. Authorities learned he had obtained a forged passport under a Romanian alias and was preparing to fly to Casablanca when they missed him by mere hours. His trail went cold somewhere in North Africa. Back in Ireland, the court prepared for what was shaping up to be the most high-profile drug trial the country had seen in decades. Prosecutors now had not only physical evidence, but also insider testimony and secret recordings. The defense team scrambled to revise strategies. Some of the accused began considering plea deals of their own, fearing what Seamus might say. Next, the cartel, watching from afar, was silent. There were no retaliation attempts, no sudden disappearances, just quiet calculation. For the authorities, that silence was more unsettling than noise. It meant the game wasn't over. It was only paused. The trial began under intense security. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter of the Special Criminal Court in Dublin as media vans lined the street, and the public buzzed with anticipation. It wasn't just a courtroom proceeding, it had become a national event. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. 8 men sat silently, dressed in identical suits, faces hardened by months in custody and the weight of global attention. They were no longer faceless smugglers. They were infamous. Headlines across Ireland had named them the Ocelot 8. Declan Voss sat in the center, his posture controlled, his expression unreadable. Even with Seamus Keogh's damning testimony and secret recordings playing across the courtroom speakers, he didn't flinch. Prosecutors built their argument methodically, beginning with the financial trail that led directly to Aidan Flynn. Flynn's connections to shell companies, crypto exchanges, and art auctions were laid bare. Screens displayed, email chains discussing inventory flow and maritime shielding, thinly veiled references to drug movements. Flynn's defense claimed it was all coded business language. The judge was unconvinced. Then came the recordings from Seamus. One by one, the audio files echoed through the court. Voices confirmed plans, drop locations, shift times, escape strategies, and contingency operations. The defense tried to discredit the authenticity, but forensic analysts confirmed the files had not been tampered with. Tiernan Quinn was heard, outlining how they'd avoid sonar detection. Ronan Vale's voice appeared, offering guidance on which inspection team to pay off. Even Brodie Neal, the youngest of them, was caught discussing Plan B routes in case naval patrols became visible too early. But the most chilling part was when Declan Voss, in a voice both calm and calculated, spoke about failure, he admitted. In a private meeting, that if the operation collapsed, the rest of the crew were expendable. Those words froze the courtroom. Brodie looked down. Callum clenched his jaw. The illusion of brotherhood was shattered. After weeks of testimony, expert analysis, and hours of footage from the Ocelot Dawn's interior cameras, the judge delivered the verdicts. Declan Voss was sentenced to 28 years in prison, one of the longest drug trafficking sentences in Ireland's history. His lack of remorse and leadership role sealed his fate. Aidan Flynn received 22 years, and his assets, luxury homes, cars, art, were seized and auctioned off by the state. Callum Redden was given 20 years. His military background, rather than earning him sympathy, was used to show how he had weaponized his skills for crime. Tiernan Quinn got 16 years. Ronan Vale, for his role in compromising port security, received 18. Brodie Neal, just 21 and manipulated into the operation, was handed 12 years. The court noted his youth, but made clear the seriousness of his role. Malik Drury, still at large, was sentenced in absentia to 19 years. International warrants remained active, but he had vanished. Seamus Keogh, whose cooperation had made the trial possible, received a reduced sentence of 5 years and was immediately placed into protective custody under a new identity. No one would ever see him again in Ireland. The case dominated headlines. For weeks, documentaries, podcasts, and special reports picked apart every detail of the operation. Schools and universities even used the story as a case study in criminology and maritime security courses. But for communities along the Irish coast, especially in Wexford and Cork, the impact was personal. They had seen the ships pass the ports and never suspected they were living beside a route that trafficked drugs on a global scale, the Ocelot. Dawn itself was seized by the Irish Navy and later scrapped 4 parts. Its name became a symbol, a warning of how carefully crime can hide in plain sight. Though 8 men were now behind bars, the authorities knew the operation they dismantled was just one part of a larger web. And somewhere, across oceans and borders, another ship was likely already on its way.